Mods are as commonplace to video games as the games themselves. They're completely inseparable. A game's protagonist being turned into CJ from San Andreas, or Bethesda's re-released anniversary editions full of content plucked from fan creations that break your modded playthroughs, are what you come to expect.
All of this just works.
But running with scissors has been running bloody circles around most game publishers since 1997. The original Postal game launched with a level developing kit, and Postal 2's 2003 launch took it up a notch by including a full software development kit for you to create whatever you so please through Unreal Editor 3, which looked painful, especially since the Steam release of the game now supports the Steam Workshop, but people persisted with what they had. Fans of the worst game of all time were allowed to publish their wildest dreams for the internet to explore and regret nothing. Some of these are curious little pieces of a simpler time from the mid-2000s. Some are expansive, downright influential total conversions that radically changed the Postal franchise forever, and some of these are borderline illegal to have on my hard drive. What I plan to do is cover a ton of these modifications for the base game, from new weaponry, maps, game modes, conversions, you name it. But not company-created DLC like Apocalypse Weekend or Paradise Lost. That will come later in my Postal franchise retrospective series, don't you worry. If you haven't already seen my full coverage of Postal 1 and 2, you know what to do. And maybe do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Trust me, this rabbit hole leads all the way down to the obligatory sewer complex. Just try not to lose your head.
Look at him. That's one nice kitty right there.
Hark! How does one actually use mods in-game? Well, there's a menu option just called Workshop Content that brings you to a sub-menu where you can individually toggle which mods to use, which map to spawn on, or game mode to play if you don't care enough to use console commands. It's as simple as just clicking which ones are active and choosing your map or mode, provided the game doesn't crash. Which it does. A lot. A lot of people inform me that my Postal 2's instability might be due to a variety of things, such as not launching the game via the exe in the files, but throwing workshop mods complicates things even further. What I've done is revert my game to an earlier beta build, version 5024 exactly, and just pray things work for the best. They often did, but sometimes they didn't, and those were my favorite bits to record. Need I remind you that Postal 2's particular version of Unreal Engine is an abomination dubbed Unreal 1.5 because of how many cobbled together aspects of both were desperately bolted together from 1 and 2 that somehow function in a single game. The fact the water just does this and doesn't crash the game is a miracle. People often complain about software like Hammer for being antiquated and borderline non-functional, but Posted takes the cake. It does more than that. It commandeers the entire bakery. Let's read some user reviews on Steam. Worst map editor of all time. This makes Hammer World Editor look like God's gift to man. Whoever made this editor deserves to be crucified. Just gaze upon the reviews for this on Steam. It's a riot. And I want you to remember the suffering of these poor mod creators, because they're braver than our troops. And now we're gonna profit from their suffering by including their work in the video. Enjoy.
I'll bet that door is unlocked.
It's a new day, but things aren't quite what they seem. Firstly, say hello to our new protagonist, the Postal Girl, a model created by Kesha Film and with contributions from Man Chazan and Evil, or Nick. She's far more than just a model swap. It outright switches the dude's voice lines to context-fitting ones from the game's female NPCs, which is a nice touch. Also, her blue highlights are really cute. The idea of the Postal Dude, but a woman, is a lot more common than you'd think and fits many different roles. The names differ, some call her Postal Doe, or Dudette, but the fact remains the same. The concept of a sex swap dude is prevalent in the fanbase. Sometimes she's a result of a horny artist, and other times a self-insert for the franchise's large proportion of women in the fanbase. That might seem like a bold claim, but the amount of Yume shippers I've seen of themselves and the dude speaks for itself. She eventually became a real character with the April Fool's Day game Postal Royale a couple years back, so who knows? Maybe she'll end up being a palette swap for the dude in future games. Check it, pissing has actually been modified to not arc nearly as much to fully immerse yourself in the woman experience. Trademark. But some members of the fairer sex did have complaints about this restriction. Hello. As a girl, I can confirm that they can piss forward. Not upwards, obviously, but forward is an option. You best get used to all those creators I listed because this is far from the only mods they've made. Why don't we explore Paradise some more? Custom weapons are always something I looked forward to when I modded my game, so why don't we start with a dead meme?
No, seriously, I want to know.
This is Fusroda from Raiko 3D and Bangladesh BGC, and it has the dude point his finger and cause a force wave around him to violently expel anything caught in its range, usually resulting in something exploding and hurting you. I always felt the dude needed some kind of crowd control for those moments you're pushed up against a wall from 20 gun-wielding terrorists. Did you ever feel like the kick was an underwhelming part of the kit? No? Well, too bad, because Multi-Legged Dude by Aminosynthesis is exactly as described. It simply pastes more functional legs onto the dude, which can be added and subtracted with console commands as you please, resulting in a playthrough where a 20+ legged dude went around as a one-man stampede stomping everything in sight. Have you ever kicked and broken something while looking in the opposite direction? Multi-Legged Dude allows you to fulfill your millipede fantasies and crush the skulls of the infidels. Look man, the sign said kick me, I was just following orders. I've also employed the use of a health bar mod, also by Aminosynthesis, which is exactly what it sounds like and simply pulls up each NPC's health and displays it visually. I really wish I knew about this mod for my dedicated Postal 2 video to show you exactly how much damage weapons do. You brothers and sisters like Pokemon, right? Or at least liked it when the series was good, ending in around Gen 7, I think? Well, Darth Fabar liked it enough to create an entire Pokeball mod that spawns one of the game's various animal NPCs when you throw it. What this actually translates to is me unleashing an elephant in the middle of Paradise and being terrified for my life as it charged directly after me. I didn't have my mic on during recording, but I promise you, I genuinely yelped in terror when it happened. Do you think Habib saw all this unfolding from the lucky Ganesh and was like, "It's about time Ganesh started causing problems here"? With no choice left, I had to put the elephant down with my quad-barrel shotgun. This is just one of the weapons included in the Hate Your State Pact by Kesha Film and Locon666, others being the Quake 2 pistol, a dragon-themed chainsaw, Saints Row 4's dubstep gun, the Sadism sword from a series of Half-Life mods, the Postal 1 machine gun, and a knife that instant kills you. All of these weapons require no ammo or fuel and are outrageously overpowered, but way too much fun for me to care about anything like balance. It's a complete mess of random weapons, but the only thing tying them together is how much fun they are to use. I highly recommend this pack to anyone who's looking to go Postal in some creative ways. But that's far from the only weapons I've got. Look at this here. This is the Christmas Weapons 1.0 pack by Bangladesh BGC, and features some classics as a snowball, rocket-propelled Christmas trees, and a phone that allows you to call Santa directly for guided missile strikes. Doesn't work that well, unfortunately. Paradise is one of gaming's most iconic sandbox towns, and I have no better way to put it through debilitating torture than to use the Props Launcher, a joint creation by Pratak and Darth Fabar. It launches nearly any in-game asset, NPCs being one of them, so naturally I spawned a dozen Vince Desies and a dozen Crotchies and let them duke it out, with a decisive victory going to the Desies. So in the span of 5 minutes, I became a woman, spawned 20 legs for myself, released elephants into the wild, started massacring people with chainsaws, dubstep, and snowballs, and created human life solely for the purpose of Mortal Kombat for my amusement. Believe me, we're only getting started. Let's take things up a notch. Do you remember fidget spinners? They were these dumb toys that were allegedly meant for helping children with ADHD or autism or something like that. Well, now you can use them because running with spinners... You think you're so goddamn clever. Created by Atelier and Bangladesh BGC allows you to throw them like shurikens. That's it. That's the whole mod. It's weird how fidget spinners were such an icon for like 2 years and then suddenly vanished forever, destined to fill landfills. I remember these in high school. A friend of mine tried to flip them by buying them in bulk. At least they can say hello to the Funko Pops when D-Day finally comes for the world's ugliest toy. Postal 2 is a really timeless look that isn't quite low poly, but definitely not high definition that just screams 2003. So to celebrate that, I've decided to decorate the town of Paradise. This is Head Spawner 2 by Aminosynthesis, and it's horrifying. Have you ever wanted Paradise to be swarmed by countless Gary Coleman heads and make it look like a scene from Germs on PS1? No? Well, that sucks because you're getting it. And yes, these heads are still props that can be interacted with how you pleased, so I set them all on fire.
Put me out! Put me out! Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I downloaded this mod on a whim because, I mean, look at it. It's mesmerizing. I don't even want to try to pronounce that, but I guess it translates to... it translates to guess, and that's what we're just gonna have to do. No, really, I have no idea what this mod does, nor do I want to do the research. I'll just let it surprise me. Did I install something malicious onto my machine? Who knows? If it's anything like this image, we're in good hands. But these are all just little items or modifications to standard Postal 2. Perhaps some of you are tired of Paradise and want a change of scenery. And don't worry, custom maps are aplenty. The dude has taken quite a few notes from Bush because he's gone intercontinental. We've got a traditional Chinese village to explore, courtesy of Sean. It's incredibly dense and does quite a lot to immerse you in the Huanan experience. Trademark. If that isn't your fancy, then perhaps Gruppy's Mario 2 might be up your alley. It's a combat/platforming map that looks straight ripped from Gary's Mod Death Run with how much it clashes with the game's art style. There's 3 little levels, a grass world, snow world, dungeon world. It's only 10 minutes or so, but it explores one of Postal 2's more understated mechanics. I spent some time exploring the New York Massacre map by Ryko 3D that lets you explore skyscrapers and take in the city's favorite pastime: wanton terrorism. Now, there's plenty of custom maps I could talk about, but some creators have gone above and beyond to replicate some of the most famous games of all time with shocking detail. First up is Doomstal Episode 1 by Reality Master. That is a wicked recreation of Doom's first episode. And lordy, she really works. It's nowhere near a full campaign, but the map looks fantastic. Sharp lighting and satisfying map design, including enemies like the Apocalypse Weekend zombies and army guards, balances everything out to create a brief but very satisfying bite-sized adventure. But maybe you're looking for something a little more chill, and Evil has provided. Welcome to Portal meets Postal, a map that aims to replicate Valve's puzzle franchise by creating a functioning portal gun for us to play around with. How cool is that? These may be primitive portals, but by God, they are indeed portals. The map feels a little broken, but the effort is more than worth the time to download and play it. Now, this is a map I've wanted to talk about for some time. From the first second you spawn in, you know you're in for something crazy. This map is called Tautaya City, created by a Japanese fan named Yobinya Kidley, meant to replicate a real city in Japan, Matsudo. And goddamn, it does a shockingly stylish job for being a 2004 creation. There is a ton of detail here, with accessible stores and stairs and advertisements everywhere. A lot of love was poured into this, but the clear highlight went into Tsutaya, a video rental chain store. Look at the texture work, the sheer attention to detail, the hidden porno section. This guy slaved to recreate his favorite video rental shop, down to what was available to rent there at the time, and it's a phenomenal time capsule. I think past any other map, this is the best one that captures a specific era, a cozy vibe of someone sharing a piece of themselves within the game's editor, and for that I'll always love it. I've got my own video store to buy secondhand movies and albums, so this felt especially relatable to me. Nothing is affordable, but the novelty is nice. The map is actually so big I wanted to use the grappling hook mod by Bangladesh BGC to get around. It's incredibly janky and loud, but she works, even if it means I'm constantly taking fall damage from flinging myself into every building imaginable. It's a lot more fun than using a simple no-clip command, that is. I did some digging and it looks like Tsutaya isn't doing so well anymore, which is not surprising, considering it was a video rental store. Here's another Japanese map called HJPK School by Himajin. If Tatuya City was a loving recreation from its author who delighted in visiting the rental store, HJPK School is fueled entirely by spite because it's clearly the end result of a Japanese teenager who hates his school and everyone in it, down to the last drop in the pool. Fully modeled classrooms and dorms, custom protests for, I don't know, a weird amount of police presence. It's incredibly horny, full of posters, the things the creator likes, even a room decked out with a custom PS2 model, a copy of JoJo's, and what I think is Romance of the Three Kingdoms 11 on the TV. How sick is that? And yes, we can do that one thing we're all thinking of. You have to understand that modeling a school in Postal 2 is not uncommon, considering the type of person who really likes this series, or at least the type of guy who mostly enjoys the first game. Some of these maps feel like playing the Columbine Doom WAD. I'm just waiting for an extradition order in the mail to be processed in the States. For a brief moment in time, Japan was quite enamored with Postal. I don't know if the first two games have any cult classic status in the land of the rising sun, but what I do know is that they arguably got more releases than we did in North America. They got the base game, all the DLC, even fan mods and expansions made their way overseas that we never got, and sometimes they got exclusive dubbing not found anywhere else. What did a Japanese audience see in a game series about a misanthropic guy getting sick of society and other people and deciding to inflict mass indiscriminate violence on them? Well, now that I've said that, it makes perfect sense, actually. Do you think any Japanese Postal fan has asked Takeshi Miike to direct a Postal movie? Maybe it was the exaggerated representation of American culture that got them really hooked, or maybe they just all want to go Postal themselves. All I know is that before the release of Postal 3, Japan got this huge combo pack featuring basically the whole franchise up until that point, where the dude looks like Obama. So make of that what you will.
Guns don't kill people, I do.
The Japanese Postal dude voice is so much more unhinged and maniacal than the American one. In the first and second game, Jun Ishimaru gave him a real shouty and aggressive attitude that contrasts quite sharply with Rick Hunter's smooth, monotonous swagger. Needless to say, he's pretty Genki. It's interesting how the dude is not just a popular figure in America, but in Asia and in Europe. Arguably more in Europe than America, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Also, at some point during my diatribe, I switched my player model to MC Ride, courtesy of Kesha Film and Evil. He comes with his own voice pack, and some of the textures are replaced with interesting memes that I can't read. So, we've explored some new maps, models, and mishaps, but let's finally take a look at custom game modes. I am excited.
Oh man, that's f***ing awesome.
Now when I say game modes, I'm referring to how the game itself refers to vanilla Postal 2 experience of Monday to Friday and the Apocalypse Weekend as separate modes. What custom game modes entail is that these are more than just swapping out textures or adding new weapons. These can radically change the entire experience. But let's start off with something fun and easy. Postal 2 Tropic is a total conversion created by Raiko 3D and Mantrozan that turns the town of Postal into a lush, tropical jungle with the sounds of beautiful wildlife all around. Reminds me of Florida. Fundamentally, this is the same game, but there is a few additions tucked away, like these new threads for the dude, and an extra Miami map that includes drivable cars. I remember this was a big criticism from a lot of gaming outlets back in the day, that Postal 2 Sandbox wasn't impressive because there was no vehicles to drive like in GTA 3, but all it took was Raiko 3D saying, "Hold my health pipe." Let's check out Hong Kong 2027 by Kesha Film and Locon 666. Hong Kong 97 really doesn't need an introduction. It's one of the most infamous video game bootlegs of all time. From the infinitely repeating music, Killer Chin's journey to kill 1.2 billion Chinese communists to save Hong Kong, or the game's backgrounds being Coca-Cola, or Mao's hit song, or the extensive lost media hunt for the corpse featured in the death screen, it really speaks for itself. But never in my wildest fever dreams would I have ever guessed that someone would think, what if we made Hong Kong 97 in Postal 2? The plot goes as follows. Mod makers are ruining Running with Scissors and causing the company to go bankrupt, so they hire Kaname, a killer machine to kill 2,500 Hong Kongers. But an ultimate weapon is being made out of the corpse of Vince Desi, and you're off to the races. This is the result, and yeah, putting them side by side is really something special. I mean, look at it, it's about as accurate as you can possibly make it. You've got your fists and an infinite pellet gun that causes everyone to explode. And just like Hong Kong 97, This game is actually really hard. You have very little health and your projectiles aren't so good, and when you die, you go back to the beginning, bud. Kaname might be a killer machine. The dude might be a killer machine. But Chin? Nobody f***s with him. This guy could solo your verse. And if that wasn't bombastic enough, not stupid enough, not pants on head dumb enough, they made a sequel called Icon of Bidet, where Kaname fights a demonic Micah J in a parody of the Icon of Sin from Doom 2. Look at that thing, it's f***ing horrifying. Why don't we all just take a quick break from the insanity, calm down, and find a more relaxing mod to play? And by relaxing, I mean blowing up pigeons with a rocket launcher. The infamous Pigeon mission is perhaps Apocalypse Weekend's biggest claim to fame. It was a planned mission that had to be cut due to time and budgetary restraints, with the FMV of Vince Desi screaming about being broke and replacing it being the God's honest truth. It's become a running joke for the company and the fan base alike, so a little Russian studio called Revival Games decided to simply create the mission themselves in 2014, and their members consist of some familiar faces, including Evil. The mission involves you hunting 75 pigeons with a rocket launcher, shotgun, and sledgehammer while defending yourself from the hicks that have a problem with that. It's impressive just how much it actually resembles a mission from the DLC proper, because it goes on for way too long and feels like a chore to beat. But keep the studio Revival Games in the back of your mind, in your pocket somewhere, because Running with Scissors took notice of their work, and if you know what happened to the year after 2014, you know. But are all these game modes a little too, story-based? Are you just looking for something more comfortable and chill? Well, Anthology Productions cooked up something called Postal Dude Life New Atmosphere, and it's a jaw-dropping recreation of Half-Life 2 inside Postal 2. Look at this, from Kleiner's lab to the streets and interiors of City 17 to the head crab zombies in the Combine, even the weapons make their reappearance here. I'm genuinely at a loss for words. It looks like Postal 2 fully moved over to the source engine. Not like that. Mind you, since Postal 2, there's tons of jank, and things won't work quite as smoothly as they did in Half-Life 2. But does that really even matter? The fact the game's atmosphere and sound design are so flawlessly transcribed here is worth the time to download this mod alone. I mean, we have a wearable HEV suit and a working gravity gun. It's confined to an extremely small section of the map, and any loading zone instantly ends the game. But what a labor of love this is. It's easily the most impressive mod I've seen yet. Well, second most. No, I'm not pulling your leg, yanking your chain, tugging your dick. This is Steamed Hams, but it's on Postal 2 by Kesha Film. It's Kesha Film's most unforgettable luncheon. This is not some lame voice pack or map. This is an entire game mode where you have to accurately retrace Principal Skinner's steps to ensure his meal with Superintendent Chalmers goes as smoothly as possible. Sounds quite basic, but it's so much more entertaining than my description entails. The comedic timing of every beat is perfect. Every replication of every moment is meticulous, both in absurdity and accuracy.
Well, Seymour, I made it, despite your directions.
Superintendent, I was just stretching my calves on the windowsill.
The butcher's place has been turned into a Krusty's location where you have to buy the burgers yourself. Or you can kill everyone if you please. Voice clips from the show are synced with every action to form a cohesive recreation of the most iconic Simpsons gag in recent memory. It's impossible to explain how seamless this all is. If you play nothing else from this video, play this one. It's the most roaring 5 minutes you'll ever experience. So far, we've covered mods, both big and small, that enhance the player experience, but not all mods are created equally. Take the Nyx co-op mod created by Evil, for instance, which is a fan recreation that set out to create a far more cohesive and comfortable multiplayer experience than Running with Scissors Shared the Pain DLC back when the original title launched. Instead of having dedicated game modes, Nyx co-op allows the traditional single player to be played with friends, kind of like Mario 64 co-op. But I have no friends to play Postal 2 with, so I'm kind of just taking testimonies from the internet. I've downloaded basically all of these from the Steam Workshop, but recall what I said at the beginning of the chapter. Postal 2 modding has existed far beyond that. I want to take a closer look at a specific trilogy of mods that have far-reaching contributions to the franchise that have radically altered the course of its history forever. And to do that, we first have to talk about A Week in Paradise. If you're anything like me, a Postal fan who started well after the game was put on Steam, I hear your confusion. But A Week in Paradise already exists in the base Steam version. Well, it's more complicated than that. Running with Scissors A Week in Paradise mode simply combines the base game with Apocalypse Weekend to form a full seamless week of going postal since 2013. But the original incarnation of A Week in Paradise, henceforth referred to as AWP, was actually a mod created by Resurrection Studios in 2007. These guys were often directly in bed with Running with Scissors for basically their entire existence because of two special projects. Resurrection Studio did far more than just make a seamless 7-day week for the dude. They went all out. A ton of weapons from other mods were seamlessly included into Paradise properly. NPCs were given facelifts and accessories, and a ton of the new stuff originally exclusive to the DLC, like added voice lines, extra gore, and the limb severance mechanic were put into the original game, which I honestly didn't even know weren't there originally. Postal 2's original version is lost to time due to a data loss by Running with Scissors, and even reverting the Steam version to earlier beta versions doesn't quite capture how the game worked at launch. A ton of dedicated fans let me know of features and weapons that were only added in later releases, which I'm grateful for. The only real way to judge Postal 2 on launch is to own a disc copy, which is not the easiest thing in the world to get running, or let alone purchase without breaking the bank. Distortions and errors are sparsely dotted throughout my coverage of the OG game, but as it stands, Postal 2 is, or at least was, an ever-evolving beast, and mods like AWP helped turn it into the product it is today, but not everything from the mod stuck around. Remember the arcades from the original game? Easily the most infamous one was called Flag Hunter, which was almost instantly retextured with the earliest patches of the game. Well, AWP not only brought Flag Hunter back, but made the cabinet playable amongst a few others. The objective in Flag Hunter is to shoot about 20 flags, which are represented as NPCs with Mike J's head, of course, and if you kill a non-flag, you lose instantly. This particular arcade cabinet has been a morbid fascination of mine within the Postal franchise because, most controversially, it represents a question I've been asking myself time and time again with Running with Scissors. How far is too far? The franchise's entire point is to piss people off with crude stereotypes and offensiveness that revel in xenophobia and racism, and all sorts of groups are the butt of the joke. But there are a few instances of the team changing their mind and deciding they might have gone a little overboard. The ending of the original Postal game ensured that there was no possible way for any of the child models to be harmed at all because one of the only consistent taboos the team refuses to breach is harming children in any way, which they've stuck by. And maybe an arcade cabinet where you explicitly kill people for their sexuality was deemed too poor of taste or too close to home for a feasible hate crime for Running with Scissors. But clearly the franchise isn't above gay jokes. The entire GIMP section was one big gay joke. Prison rape is brought up regularly. The entire category is in the dude's crosshairs, but the cabinet specifically was what the company deemed irresponsible and worthy of removal. I'm not exactly lamenting over a single texture being removed, but there are interesting discussions to be found in what is deemed unacceptable in a franchise where offensiveness is the norm. The game series started off in the 90s and is still around to this day, so of course people's tastes and tolerances and standards are going to change. I can't speak for an entire group, but older fans generally get more upset with Running with Scissors when they remove things or pitch softer balls and are less offensive, while newer ones often agree with those decisions and think better of the company. The fanbase has a little bit of this going on, but the company is a little mixed on supporting the arcade games. It was scrubbed off most official releases, but they give shoutouts on their official website, so really it's up to the individual to decide if it's okay or if it's too far. But you know what's even more controversial? The fact they know who the irate gamer is. Ooh. Over and over again, they've explained they don't often entirely consider the backlash or implications some of their gags could have. So a lot of the stuff retroactively scrubbed is just that, retroactive. They took another look at it and went, oh, maybe that was a bad idea. Legality is also in contention because more sensitive governments really don't appreciate those jokes in any context. I live in one of the only white people countries that doesn't ban everything, so I consider myself somewhat fortunate for being able to play the franchise as uncompromised as it is. Does Running with Scissors distance itself from certain topics after Running with Scissors with them originally? Well, you have to examine that in their later work, and we're ways away from that. But let's get a bit edgier. AWP actually added new areas into the game that expanded Paradise a bit further, and one of these was called School Days, a full school or university on the outskirts of town that replaced Caucasian for the ballot voting site, as well as acting as an optional zombie hunting mission. I think we all know what the purpose of this map is and what it's saying without actually saying it, and yes, we can do that one thing we're all thinking of. Technically, the map has a metal detector, so you're not always intended to come to school armed to the teeth, and there's only adult NPCs anyways, but really there's nothing stopping you from rampaging School Days. Most of the mods I browsed here were on English and on the ClearNet, but I have no doubt in my mind there's an accurate school map floating around somewhere on VK or one of the shadier parts of the net, but I leave that in your hands. Listing all the differences and changes AWP made would be exhausting, but just know that it was considered modding royalty that got special attention from the company. The original AWP is no longer functional since Postal 2 keeps getting updated, but its legacy lives on somewhat through the 7-day week in the complete Steam version and through A Week in Paradise Forever by Devirment, which aims to bring back all the classic features but also adds a few new ones, like expanded cheats and some old school HUD designs. But recall what I said about Resurrection Studios. I said that there were 2 special projects that got running with Scissor's attention, and AWP was just one of them. A year prior, in 2006, they released the infamous Total Conversion Eternal Damnation, and to say this one was influential is a grand, offensive understatement. Let's see what all the hype is about. The goal of a Total Conversion mod is to turn one game into another, and it entirely depends on the specific mod and whether it achieves that or not. Eternal Damnation is Postal 2's exemplary Total Conversion, the one that all others look up to, the cream of the crop, or in this game's case, the blood of the piss. This was something you could download from the studio's website if you had a copy of Postal 2 Share the Pain, but now there's a Steam Workshop and Mod DB port of the game, courtesy of Manchurzan Evil. God, I can't keep doing that voice. All you have to do is launch it from Postal 2 and it launches all on its own. But OBS likes to record it like this, so let me fix that. The Steam version worked pretty well for me, but it is known to get a bit quirky sometimes. I was struggling to think of an enticing enough description to try and explain Eternal Damnation, but I think this guy's review on Backlogged, follow me by the way, sums it up pretty well. The result is a perfect crystallized gem of 2006 edge. I think this description is more than apt, because Resurrection Studios not only enjoyed the edgier aspects of Postal, they felt the series didn't go far enough. Some may find it juvenile and roll their eyes at it, but I love that kind of stuff. I poke fun at things like Shadow the Hedgehog, but really, this is my era. I grew up with it. Here's a list of shamelessly edgy games I earnestly like. Maybe one day I'll have to do a whole edgy games apologist video, but for now, Eternal Damnation is a pretty good representation of sincerely edgy media. It doesn't blow its chance whatsoever. The environments are all dark, claustrophobic, and deeply atmospheric. Gone are the innocent sounds of nature or mumblings of goofy NPCs, instead replaced with groaning ambience and pulse-pounding music that often incorporates screaming and banging metal pipes against the floor to create an unyielding atmosphere.
Hey, Father Winston, how you doing, man?
Semi-abandoned asylums, crooked towns and cities, derelict museum and gothic churches are just a few of the locations we can explore, all modeled with enough details to fit right at home in the game proper, but stand out enough to provide a much more threatening look at suburbia within Hasselridge, the game's setting. It's closer in line with something like Manhunt or The Suffering than Postal. Assets new and old are mixed together to feel familiar, but still wholly original. Some of the stuff is remarkably impressive, like a functioning Ferris wheel, roller coaster, even a subway train. How a small team of modders did what Bethesda could not is beyond me. What absolutely caught my attention with this mod is that in no way does it attempt to replicate a Postal game in terms of core gameplay loop, tone, or feeling. This is not an errand simulator. This is a linear adventure with a straight-shot campaign with a definitive beginning and end. And it certainly isn't as much of a black comedy because things are as serious and dire as they can possibly get, and nowhere more apparent is that found in the game's messy, downright confusing, diabolical story. We play as John Murray, a clearly not Mike J-headed man in a mental asylum. How did he get there? By killing someone who was harassing his girlfriend, Lori, and throwing his body down the stairs. And if the dialogue wasn't enough of a clue, everyone's got a bit of a potty mouth, especially John.
You better get the f away from my girlfriend. Yo, who the f is this? Hey, cocksucker. I got an idea. How about you let me out the f***ing gates, and I won't cut your balls off and suffocate you to death with them. Fucking fat.
The story is fully voice acted, which means we can get a ton of stilted in-engine cutscenes that weren't really my cup of tea. You end up spending a lot of time just waiting around for you to regain control while someone tells you something blatantly obvious or reveals a story beat you're about to experience in 5 minutes. The voice acting itself is definitely on the amateur side with wildly inconsistent microphone qualities, but for a free fan mod, it really wasn't that offensive to hear. It's no worse than my microphone quality most of the time.
Hey dude, good to see you. I thought we were the last goddamn humans in this town.
Oh yeah? What are you doing around here?
We open up with John escaping the asylum by fighting the other inmates, which lets us clue in that Eternal Damnation is all about the combat, with none of the sandbox or quote-unquote immersive sim elements. Just clear each dungeon or map and advance to the next. The asylum gives us our first few weapons aside from our bare fists. A butcher's knife, Glocks with akimbo options, Beretta pistol, it just keeps going. Later on we have our choice of shoddy, a ridiculous amount of melee weapons, a flamethrower, throwing knives, an MP5. John Murray is a walking talking armory with an absurd amount of weapons at his disposal, and a lot of these should seem familiar to you. That's because many of these are custom Resurrection Studios creations that would later find themselves inserted into Postal 2 or later Paradise Lost. A ton of Postal 2's melee options, like the axe, my beloved shears, actually originated from Eternal Damnation. How cool is that? Now that I'm viewing my Postal 2 video retrospectively, I can understand people's 2003 criticisms for the inventory being kind of lame, because a lot of the weapons I praised straight up didn't exist at the time, but were later add-ons. But most people played the later editions anyways, so whatever. However, the linear structure of Eternal Damnation means you're going to be drowning in weapons and ammunition within hour 1 of the game, and there's almost no challenge into finding OP weapons to give you an edge. So nearly everything in this game is no sweat at all, since you should have the perfect answer for anything a mere click away, not from a result of good map design or clever strategy, but from playing the game with any modicum of skill to simply keep yourself alive. That isn't to say there aren't secret areas, there are, but what I'm saying is that this game is as easy as piss and only gets easier later on, for the most part. They kept explosive weapons at a minimum, but they did add this dastardly piece of hardware called the original shotgun, which was a restored piece of content from Postal 2's beta and does an excessive amount of damage. We got bongs. Instead of medkits, we got blood packs and painkillers. You can use whatever weapon you like, and I found myself preferring the baseball bat. The city is where things get interesting. Besides the ethnic cleansing happening, I mean. Since John is a fugitive, he leads to Lori's place to hide out, and she suggests camping out at the museum she works at. A lot of time is dedicated to telling us that Lori refuses to drink bottled water because tap water is free, and that the museum hosts the very holy water that Jesus used to raise Lazarus from the dead. ED kinda does that a lot. Kinda just throws characterizing details in the middle of an exposition dump. It's appreciated, but it does kinda feel like something you'd see in school, where a student has to insert the exact details an assignment demanded at the very end in order to not fail a story assignment. I remember when I was in grade 3 or 4, I had to describe the setting my short story took place in order to pass, but forgot to do that because I was having too much fun describing my adventure with Giratina and Arceus, so at the very end I just had Giratina mention that we were in a cave and describe what it looked like in order to not fail. Also, I'm pretty sure the raising of Lazarus involved less holy water and more Jesus shouting at Lazarus like, "Wakey, wakey, 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 it's time for school." We've got to pass through town and a military base and a bit more until we make it to John's disgusting rundown house, where the game's combat takes a turn for the worse. The zombie apocalypse happens. Again. I felt this to be such an unneeded and even disappointing change, because what little difficulty or strategy we had to employ prior is completely thrown out the window, because these zombies are totally brainless. It's the same ones we had in Apocalypse Weekend, but at least there they were balanced by having to headshot them, and they worked a lot better within a mission structure. ED swaps fast, projectile shooting enemies for slow, melee-only zombies that possess no real threat to you whatsoever. Just look at the ratio of human to zombie kills. Most of this game is killing zombies, which makes combat feel extremely repetitive and samey no matter what weapon you use, and it just goes on and on and on. There are a few SWAT guys, giant rats, creepy super zombies, but there's no reason to not just one-tap everything with your choice of melee weapon and reserve all your ammo for a bigger fight for the entire game. This is where it dawned on me. This game is way longer than it needs to be. The story is spread incredibly thin across 19 separate levels, all distinct and impressively made, but most of those 19 levels are swamped with boring zombies and often confusing map design that's really unintuitive and often obfuscates the sole exit. So areas like the carnival and the subway become sprawling labyrinths that take way longer than they should to complete. They even found a way to copy the exhausting missions of the DLC by making you kill at least 75 zombies when you reach the museum. Like, throw me a frickin' bone here. Something especially insidious within these expansive levels is that you often need to travel to one part of the map to unlock a gate or access a door, then hoof it all the way back to where you just were in order to get it again. Classic waste your time game design that the originals surprisingly kept to a minimum. That's like if you had to go to RWS office before cashing your check instead of having the freedom to choose your errand order. Oh, believe me, ED is far from the worst offender of that, but we'll get there when we get there. However, something awesome in this release is that the game introduces fully fleshed out bosses. Boss characters in the OG game are slightly stronger enemies that have a lot of health and maybe a unique weapon or trait. The bosses in ED have entirely different AI and designs, and our first real one is this winged demon in the museum's basement. Not exactly a hard fight because all we need to do is use the weapon it outright dropped in front of us, but the effort is very commendable. Exiting the museum through the sewers and walking all across the town's ghetto, we meet back up with Lori, who is suspiciously holding bottled water. She's mad at John because he left her, like, back at her house in the city, bringing up old wounds of when John was distant with her in high school because his dad, who runs a carnival by the way, didn't approve of their relationship. Apparently this is severe enough for Lori to break up with John right then and there. So the story takes a massive detour to the carnival for John to speak with his dad. If I'm not explaining that well, don't worry, the game didn't either. As if I wasn't befuddled enough, the reason John's dad gives as to why he didn't want his son to date her is nothing short of insane. Father Winston, the priest we spoke to in the church who warned of coming end times that I totally forgot to bring up until now, apparently raped her because the police found him on top of her while she was tied up in his bed, and John's dad didn't want his son to get an STD from Winston. He's super mad at Winston, understandably, but shares no sympathy or worry for Lori, the victim of the crime, and was more concerned that the priest had the clap. It's said so bluntly and matter-of-factly, and despite the fact the end times are here and that zombies are burrowing out of the ground from the very circus the two are talking at, John stops everything and decides that Winston's gotta die, which is the last story beat until the final 20 minutes of the game. But need I remind you, this whole revelation takes place in a circus with multiple Gary Colemans running around? It's not that the story is edgy I take umbrage with, I have no problems with that, it's that it's baffling and just goes in whatever direction it feels like, and not always in a charming way. The absurdity is definitely just a little bit intentional, but at no point does it feel coherent or resemble anything close to an arc for anybody, which begs the point of why so many super serious narrative cutscenes were needed in the first place. Things happen is how I describe ED's story. Sometimes those things are funny, sometimes they're graphic, and sometimes things just happen. And I hope that motivates you for another hour, because that's all you're getting. An hour of stale, repetitive zombie popping. At least Apocalypse Weekend had different objectives to break up the monotony a tiny bit. This is just the same thing over and over again. There are very few levels that get me excited, but having to race to the end of a subway while a demoness attempts to drag it to hell was pretty tight. Also the Saw room too, because nothing screams 2000s more than a Saw reference. We eventually, and I cannot stress how much I am understating the term eventually here, get back to the church, where John wastes no time and just empties a mag right into Father Winston. But in his dying breath, Winston drops a massive revelation. He never raped Lori. Rather, he was performing an exorcism because she was possessed by the devil, and he was interrupted by the police. This forces John to think back to the few encounters he had with Lori recently. She had bottled water, despite being so vehemently against it. The zombie apocalypse, Winston's premonition. John finally puts it all together. Lori was spotted in Catholic Mass and messed with the holy water mentioned at the beginning, which turned people into zombies. When innocent blood is spilled, the eternal damnation begins.
He said it! He said it!
All those zombies John killed. Father Winston, all innocent blood he spilled. And the apocalypse is here, with a fully demonic Lori at its helm, who is also naked for some reason. This moment is treated as an earth-shattering plot twist meant to blow your mind, but the way Edie's story is told kinda just made me go, okay. I really appreciate the earnesty to fully lean into shocking plot twists for the sake of being badass, but I'll be damned, eternally damned if you will, if it doesn't feel like the game's story feels like bullet points loosely strung together. But whatever, John's now got nothing to lose, so we've got to kill Demon Lori. After a pointless zombie hunt, that is. Okay, now we can kill Lori. After she kills her dad, and we basically don't care, and then she summons Satan, that is. Yeah, she looks pretty pleased with herself. Our final boss, Satan, is nothing short of an exercise in confusion. Lori herself can basically be one-tapped and is not a factor whatsoever, but Satan's grenade launcher has a borderline lock-on feature that means you'll be taking a ton of explosive damage to the face. There's a few blood packs scattered around, but you best be quick on smoking your bowls, boy. So if the rest of the game was a cakewalk, this is like locking your toddler in a room with a rabid bear and telling him, good luck. Bullets do basically no damage to him whatsoever. Melee weapons are a guarantee way to die instantly, so the only solution you really have is to use all your grenades and Molotov cocktails, which you should have plenty of, but I think I found an exploit of sort that won me the fight in like 5 seconds. So I pulled out my chainsaw to see if I could cheese the fight by breaking his AI. I guess Satan just can't take what he dishes out because one single grenade blew him up instantly? Am I seeing that right? There's no way one shot took out 75% of his life bar. I guess that won the fight. When the devil goes low, you grab a shovel. John doesn't feel too accomplished with killing the devil. He lost his father, his girlfriend, and now the world is doomed. In his guilt, he re-institutionalizes himself back in the asylum from the start, ending eternal damnation. Well, after he blows his brains out in homage to Postal 2's ending. Oh boy, Eternal Damnation's story is nothing short of a mess. An incredibly entertaining mess, but a mess nonetheless. Perhaps I'm a fool for taking a mod of Postal 2's story so seriously, but if the game wants to attempt having something resembling a 3-act structure with a plot twist, then I really don't know what to tell you. You would be absurd for taking the OG game's story even remotely seriously, so things like the sudden, inexplicable apocalypse happening at the end are inherently funny because it leans into being contrived and nonsensical. There were no expectations to be broken in the first place. Even if it doesn't make a lot of sense, there's a clear vibe that everyone who penned this narrative and coded this game was having a blast. And for that, I can't fault it. Not even a little bit. There's even a free roam mode where you can explore John's Hasselridge neighborhood if you so please. Not much to do outside of messing around with cheats, but it's fun enough. It's got that schlocky B-movie vibe down pat, so if that's your thing, I can't recommend Eternal Damnation enough. But for me, I'm somewhere in the middle. Maybe I'm being too harsh in judging a completely free fan mod, but nearly every marvelous aspect of this game comes with accompanying jank and frustrations, and the bad of this game makes it an occasional chore to play. I don't think Postal 2 works very well as a linear point A to point B adventure, because every time it's tried, it's gotten some pretty mixed results. Perhaps the real Eternal Damnation here is playing this game in one sitting. The good is definitely more impressive than the bad, because everything good about this game was placed into Postal 2. Most importantly, its staff. I've been pretty quiet about the actual people behind Resurrection Studios, but Running with Scissors not only took notice of their diligent work, they outright hired some of their staff. Members like Skillmaster, Kamek, and Tim Wambolt were later hired by the studio to work on the Paradise Lost expansion, and John Merchant was hired almost immediately at the company after ED came out. Their resumes are incredibly impressive. Everyone on the team pulled their own weight and was capable of doing multiple different jobs, with members like Wambolt both voicing John Murray and doing texture work, composing music, designing levels. It's kind of funny that Eternal Damnation had more team members than Running with Scissors did when they were creating Postal 2 themselves. And now that the company was beginning to bring in money, they could show that appreciation by hiring them. John Merchant and Lana Foltz, aka Kamek, still work at the company to this day. The exploits of these members are for future video entries, but I want to bookend Resurrection Studios by introducing one of Postal's funniest re-releases, the Fudge Pack. Yes, this is an official product and it's hilarious. The Fudge Pack was a compilation released at the end of 2006 that bundled the original Postal game, along with 2, Share the Pain, Apocalypse Weekend, but also Eternal Damnation and A Week in Paradise. This was an official release by Running with Scissors, a declaration that these mods were on par with the company's own output. Official game publishers releasing fan mods for retail is a bit of a weird territory, but Running with Scissors, the innovators that they are chill like that and worked out something real nice. Regardless of how I feel about it, Eternal Damnation is an unmistakable part of the series' history that's looked back upon as a curious time capsule to a different time, but one worth remembering. And allegedly there's a remake called Eternal Damnation Resurrection that has been on and off in development for like over a decade. Every time it seems like one of the old team members could come back and start working on it again, another project rears its head, so its official status is, I've consistently mentioned that Postal is something of a global franchise, which is odd because it's split down the middle of being contraband, but also a bastion of PC gaming and player expression. It's an American franchise that had a brief golden hour in Japan, but absolutely nothing compares to the unrelenting, unbelievable, unstoppable death grip this franchise has had in Eastern Europe. To get video games published in other territories of the world, you have to partner up with different publishers, obviously. They're usually going to know how to market that specific title in their countries better than the original publishers, and they're going to handle a lot of the more obnoxious localization things. It's just a whole lot easier. Postal 2 was already in the hot seat for publishers because the company had generated so much bad press that almost no one wanted to take them. So partnering with Whiptail Interactive, a British company, was kind of a desperation move, and that relationship didn't go so well immediately after launch. So in short, Running with Scissors really had to jump at any publishing offers they can get their hands on, and their most loyal and consistent publisher was actually a Russian company named Akela. You'll often hear comparisons of it being Russia's version of EA, which is terrifying, but it's so much deeper than that.
Блять.
If you know anything about Russia in relation to video games, you'll know it's a complete nuthouse. Consoles are hard to come by because the collective net worth of the country is like $5, so everyone is essentially stuck on PC, and saying piracy is rampant in Eastern Europe is like saying today is a day that ends in Y. A testimony from the Postal documentary that came out in 2025 states that you can have 2 stores right next to each other that both sell video games for the computer. One sells legitimate games and the other only sells bootlegs. And there's basically no way to distinguish the two on the outside. Piracy and bootlegs were the only way you could play a ton of these games, and Akela made a name for themselves by essentially being the Al Capone of video game bootlegging. It's not like Nintendo would start dispatching the Yakuza to Russia because of illegal copies of Super Mario Bros. So Akela would just distribute whatever PC game they can get their hands on. The actual quality of these translated bootlegs was basically a guessing game, but if the game was good enough, the audience would simply have to cope. I think at some point Akela made so much money from this they started to go legit and started to legally publish games in Russia, and they jumped at the chance to distribute Postal 1 upon release. Postal 2's Russian localization was something of an anomaly because it was a frighteningly high-quality job that not only generated a ton of sales for Akela, it immediately got the attention of the company itself. Mike J said it best.
It wasn't until the game was released in Russia by Akela that it really started selling big units, and it was a a smash hit in Russia.
Which implicitly says that Russia, and subsequently Eastern Europe, is why the game began to become profitable, which is remarkable. The Postal dude in Russia is voiced by Alexander Gruzdev, a beloved dub actor in the country, and according to some YouTube comments, he had no idea what the context to any of his lines were and knew nothing about the game itself. So he gave a delightfully psychotic, hammy performance that a ton of people swear by.
Ты что, опять сохраняешься? Кто-нибудь зажгите спичку. Подождите, это плохая идея. Завтра это будет болеть.
I don't think it's hard to see why this game was all over Russia and other countries like Poland. It was buggy, but can still run on low-spec PCs. And that kind of lowbrow shock jock humor is what I would describe as a hood classic over there. In fact, nearly every mod developer I've featured so far has been from Russia or Poland. That's how big Postal is in Eastern Europe. This is all to say, Akella did well with Postal 2. So much so, they decided to get ballsy. They had experience with the nightmarish version of Unreal Engine the game ran on. They had money to play around with, and they had a dream. Enter Avalon Style Entertainment. Who are they? Great question. They made a very funky looking Eurojank FPS game called Sabotane Break the Rules that Akella published. The exact details are a mystery, at least on the English speaking internet, but Akella's status as the official distributor of Postal in Russia led them to either commissioning or just asking Avalon to create a full expansion of Postal 2 specifically for a Russian audience. And get this, Running with Scissors gave it the thumbs up, probably because they didn't care, but a thumbs up regardless. This is a fully legal expansion of the game, but why is it in a video about mods? Well, unlike Apocalypse Weekend, you needed the Russian version of Postal 2 for this to work, so it might as well be a total conversion mod. And when the hell am I ever gonna get the chance to cover this game? This is Shtopor Zizot, roughly translated as Corkscrew RuLes. Russian is really hard to pronounce, but it's still fun to try, so please have mercy on me. You're supposed to own a disc of this game and the Russian version of Postal 2 in order to play it, which I did indeed buy. As for the title, I found a comment from Civi's video on this game that explains that it's an uncommon term for someone making a witty but juvenile joke, with the corkscrew being the guy who told the joke, apparently. So I guess it's Russia's version of, "Oh no, you didn't!" Initially I was planning on trying to run the disc release, but as it turns out, trying to run Russian PC games from 2005 is really hard to do. But it doesn't even matter, because Evil has done something incredible and made us a port of the game taken from the English localization, along with some new additions I'll explain when they come up. But the game was never released in America, or Canada for that matter, so how is there a localization? It only came out in Russia and Japan, where it was called From Russia with Love and received a full English script and dub. Come on! I can only imagine how a Japanese studio rounded up a bunch of Russians to dub this game in English. Whatever you do, for the love of Jah, do not download the Steam Workshop version. It doesn't work. Download the ModDB version, drag that folder into your downgraded version of Postal 2's files, and launch that .exe file once it's there, and the game should work fine. I've got such a headache, and I haven't even started the game. Our story begins with the protagonist, who is not the dude, but a new character altogether, the titular Shtupor, or Corkscrew, who wakes up in an asylum and finds out that he's the victim of a forced sex change operation that removed his penis and gave him a vagina, and now he's kicked out and put back on the streets. The game just started and we have an involuntary sex change. The procedure, naturally, made him quite upset, but it also gave him a split woman personality with her own distinct VA that talks about sleeping with men, which makes Corkscrew mad, because he's not gay!
Gotta grab some beer, think it'll lower?
Yeah, right. I can Fuck. What's wrong with my voice? Maybe my balls are sleepy or something.
How are you, my babies?
That's the story. Find your penis. He also has amnesia, and he needs to remember who he is by checking out some posters across town. This is easily one of the most insane openings to any game I've ever seen. What kind of premise is that? What? I will say that Corkscrew himself is a pretty interesting character design. He originally just had the dude's model, but the Steam port made him look like his box art depiction, which is also the dude, but jacked and wearing camo pants with a telnechkia, his striped blue undershirt that's part of the armed forces wardrobe. Let's address the elephant in the cage here, the dub.
Yes, my brain is scorched. How it is with a real man.
Hey, stop that bitch! Fuck this stuff! Well, it's already late. Lights out.
Everyone sounds like they're reading their lines at gunpoint, and it just doesn't even attempt to sync up with the caption script. But I think that adds to the experience. No one's voice matches up with their models whatsoever. It's excellent. Being created in Russia, translated in English, but filtered through Japan, and finally ending up back in English-speaking countries is like playing Postal 2 filtered through 8 terrible translations, like you're playing Pokemon Vietnamese Crystal. I think the original Russian cast tried to take their role seriously. Not so much here. Corkscrew will seemingly at random switch between his male and female voice, you know, because he's cut root and stem, so get used to that. The pissing mechanic was originally removed from the game for the same reason, which is honestly kind of awesome attention to detail, but the Steam port adds it back but doesn't let you shoot it up. Refer back to the original urination criticism. It actually really screws you over if you get caught on fire because you don't have a way to put yourself out, so if you even touch a lick of flames, bye-bye. Unbelievably, Corkscrew RuLes is an errand simulator that revolves around checking the map to do specific tasks, but with completely new objectives and a new map design. Welcome to Mushorrenk? It gets to a point. Fly City. And I'm honestly a little impressed at how different it is from Paradise. Paradise was a sweltering, low-income Arizona town with cacti and desert rock everywhere, while Fly is this damp, cold, nearly abandoned-looking Russian town with run-down homes and broken machinery everywhere. And based on testimonies from Russian fans, this is kind of just what bum villages in the middle of nowhere in the country look like. It just looks cold and miserable. It captures the post-Soviet depression so well, both stylistically but also economically, because these houses are tacky in a way that only a post-Soviet country's houses could be. Everything looks so cheap and about to crumble. The sky is always gray. The only buildings with fundings are the prison, the militia, which I think is analogous to the police in Russia at the time, the Culture House, which is kind of like a fancy community center, and one random mansion in the ghetto. This place is honestly pretty depressing to explore, and despite how small it is, I actually had fun exploring the valleys and interiors and other stalker-esque locations, even if the loading zones don't make any sense. There's been a lot of reskins to fully immerse yourself in the Russian experience. Trademark. Dollars are now rubles, crack has been replaced with vodka, a legally distinct version of Stolichnia to be exact, which only restores 100 health instead of 125, and gives you withdrawals and this new dizzy effect exclusive to the Steam port. There aren't a lot of weapons to get, but the machine gun and pistol have been reskinned to make you feel like a gopnik. There is 3 new weapons, however. Dirty socks, which are a reskin of scissors, a frying pan I couldn't find, and a slingshot I also couldn't find. They're all terrible. Just use the shotgun and the pistol, you're fine. Unlike Eternal Damnation, the sandbox element is still here, if in a much more diminished form. We can still break into people's houses to obtain weapons, there's multiple days in the week with a notoriety system and errands, but wow, they messed up errands badly. You rarely ever get to choose your errands, you have to do each one in order. And for some godforsaken reason, the objectives are often on the complete opposite sides of town every time, which means I ran all the way from the asylum to the militia for Corkscrew to remember he's a porn star, then I have to run all the way to the Culture House to get some info from a prostitute. And by info I mean get a blowjob, an attempted blowjob, because Corkscrew doesn't have a penis anymore. But he really likes to get eaten out as this cutscene shows, so I'm glad I did all that. This is the best example of what the game's sense of humor is, and to say it's lowbrow and offensive is perhaps the understatement of the millennium. Postal 2 is already shocking, okay? Corkscrew RuLes makes it look like Chibi Madoka-chan. There is no joke too crass or too shocking to make, and it causes some friction with Postal fans. There are at least some things running with scissors won't do gags about. Yeah, Corkscrew RuLes does not care and will use every slur in the book if it wants to, and it's proud of it. The very targeted gags are especially contentious amongst Postal fans, and I get why people wouldn't like it, but do heed what franchise these games belong to. Corkscrew RuLes is the Russian version of what 2 was doing, and the Russian equivalent of this kind of humor is much more shocking than the American version, so not everyone's going to like it. I think there's nothing wrong with being repulsed by it or criticizing it, but it is kind of weird to act like Corkscrew RuLes was some kind of blasphemous piece of unacceptable material when Postal 2 makes very similar jokes. At least they had more subtlety. Can't believe I'm saying that. It's less that Postal 2 is above it, but has more decorum and thought put into it. The interest is using it to prop up a reference or something. It's like comparing a stand-up comic's joke about a shocking topic versus that one kid in high school who thought saying a slur unprompted was the bee's knees. Fundamentally similar things, but one of them is clearly more written and structured and has more thought put into it. I found Postal 2 more entertaining for that reason, but am I gonna lie in your face and say I didn't find some of the dicier moments really funny because of how sudden and stupid they are? Not at all.
You are the Batman or
Russia has a pretty different culture compared to America, so I think it's fair to assume the targeted gags aren't entirely in good nature, or at least not assumed to have the same. But in all seriousness, I don't hate this group of people a mocking kind of attitude provided in America. But look man, if Corkscrew's gender-bending adventure was some kind of attempt at bigotry, it failed, because it's too dumb to take seriously. Also, this game is ludicrously horny, like to the point where you actively see snippets of porn on the street and on computers. Sex and vice and degeneracy is part of the plot, it's completely inescapable. Again, Postal has the Postal babes to promote the franchise, but they don't even bother with clothing in Russia, I guess. It really puts into perspective why dirty socks are considered weapons here. Trying to explain any cutscene in this game is literally impossible, by the way.
Get down yourself. It's dirty here. Everybody down.
After that, we have to find the newspaper to see what's going on in town, but there's none in the library. But we can buy a surgeon's guide for some money to resemble an actual Postal 2 errand. We go all the way to the newspaper company, then go all the way to the prison's basement to speak to a doctor to gather clues on where our Johnson went. Look at this map. Look how far it makes you run around. I guess Avalon didn't feel like programming choosable errands. Something genuinely hilarious about this game is that Corkscrew just lies the entire time about what he's doing to the authorities and gets away scot-free, despite multiple mandatory arrests throughout the game.
You see, I'm a private detective. I'm working on a case. They often show me on TV. My name is Holmes. Sherlock Holmes. Here's the problem. My dearest favorite schlong got stolen. It was my grandfather's. He fought Hitler himself with it. I really cherish that relic.
You don't have the choice in errands to be a pacifist or kill people most of the time. You're completely railroaded and not given many opportunities to even do anything in the sandbox, which is a huge downgrade that misses the entire point of Postal 2, but whatever bro, they made Sabotane break the rules. They can do whatever they want. With a name like that, I'm an idiot for expecting any of these renegades to follow a coherent outline. Also, Bin Laden may or may not be an excellent surgeon in town, but don't worry about it. I did all this, and it's only Monday. Would you believe me if I said it got worse? Because it does! Tuesday begins with an information hunt to find our Johnson again, but done in the most psychotically freakish way I've ever seen programmed. You see these 3 areas circled on the map? No, you can't visit them in any order. You have to visit them in an order like this. Does anything in the game tell you that? I don't know. Maybe it's only in Russian somewhere, but I sure as hell didn't know that when I played. If you try going out of order, I think the mission flags just don't trigger at all. Awesome. By pure luck, I did it in the correct order and went to the Fook building first. But of course, it's not as simple as just doing the task. You're sent on a wild goose chase to different secretaries around the office, all claiming that the boss is in a different room. But you have to do it in order for specific doors to be unlocked. What is the order? It's RNG. Good luck! Thankfully, There's no consequences whatsoever to just blowing their heads off, so don't even bother with trying to engage with the clear Soviet bureaucracy gag here. These guys made Sabotane break the rules. They can do whatever they want. I went to Jolly, Oregon, which provided nothing at all, and then I got kidnapped by the police and robbed of all of my items and money. So I spent all that time roaming the map looking for weapons and cash. Too bad. Back to square one. Why? What's the point? I guess they really wanted the player to feel Russian, because getting robbed at gunpoint by police for no reason sounds pretty commonplace there. Also, the fact we were arrested for porn piracy? Arrested for piracy. In Russia. How insane do you have to be to get arrested for piracy in Russia? That's like being arrested in England for public intoxication. We head to the Oriental Medical Center, meet Bin Laden, and we have to antagonize the members of a penis-based cult and speak to a congressman. But believe it or not, this is one of the game's only real instances of resembling a classic Postal chore. Working with him leads you on a wild goose chase to different areas where the end result is, but if you shoot him in the head, you can skip all of that instantly and just go home to finish the day. That's very appreciated, but there are no consequences whatsoever for this action. For as ineffective as it was, Postal 2 swarming you with combat encounters for taking the murder route at least tried to tie in with a thematic point and presented consequences to help players make an informed decision on how they want to interact with the sandbox. No such thoughts here. That's the most damning part of this whole experience. It's like they didn't understand what fundamentally made Postal 2 work, or they didn't care. I've been pretty harsh on this game, but do you know what the best thing about it is? No, really. It's the music. The soundtrack for this game is genuinely phenomenal. Postal 2's OST largely consisted of ambient noises and a few metal songs thrown in, but Corkscrew RuLes soundtrack has an extensive amount of what I think is ska. It sounds fantastic. I know nothing about Russian music or the bands they licensed, but this very weird blend of pop punk, distorted guitars, and trumpets gives the entire experience a very invigorating and carefree feel that makes going Postal and Mother Russia a fiercely more enjoyable experience. If you take away nothing else from this game, give its soundtrack a listen because it's well worth it. Now it's Wodan's day and we're still no closer to finding our Johnson, but we can find some crotchy reskins protesting... I don't know. We gotta go meet a guy in one part of town, then hoof it all the way to a drug dealer's shack to go give an elephant an enema because they were smuggling drugs through it. And if we help them, they'll give us intel. And that intel is that there's an illegal organ trade happening in the city and our penis is probably in shipment to somewhere in the Levant? I can't even act shocked anymore. I'm broken. This is normal now. And of course, giving the elephant an enema is a cutscene when it really should have been a hilarious minigame. So now we get to have a way more freeform experience. In order to get our Johnson back, we need to obtain a photo of it when it was still attached, get 5 signatures as proof that it was ours, and get the photo notarized. Apparently Corkscrew's corkscrew is so iconic that anyone in town can see a photo of it and go, yeah, it's his, without question. Getting the photo involves us going to the porn studio again, and getting a still from one of our old films, only after enduring some sexual humiliation in a gimp suit for a photo shoot, that is. Once we have it, we get a total copy-paste of Tuesday's petition in the regular Postal 2, but you only need 5 signatures this time. And wow, Corkscrew gets really mad if you don't sign the photo. 5 signatures later, and we need to head to the underground gay club to find the guy to give us the seal of approval. But he wants to use our ass, which is a bad idea because Corkscrew had a ton of pea soup the other day. We get the go-ahead after agreeing to get a multi-manned tomorrow, which we're totally going to agree to and not Molotov them. Totally. And after all of that, we gotta run all the way to the airport, talk to this guy, and we're finally given our Johnson back, but it's in a jar. I made it sound quick, but this took well over an hour. I was losing what little of my mind I had left, but the end is in sight, and all we have to do is talk to Bin Laden, the surgeon, to get it reattached. Uh-oh, Bin Laden was secretly Bin Laden, and we've been victim to his master plan all along. So he wants to become the ultimate life form by stealing people's body parts. So far he has Boris Yeltsin's liver, George Bush's skull, Santa Claus's beard, J-Lo's ass, Boy's jaws from toothpaste commercial, and finally Corkscrew's penis, which he takes from him and swaps out with his own. Good night, sweet prince indeed. What does that even look like? Behold, the ultimate life form. I have no clue what the jaws part is supposed to reference, so I kinda just went rogue with that one. What do you want me to say here? I think the story speaks for itself. Never thought I'd picture Bin Laden with a BBL, but here we are. Thursday is our last day of the week, and it's only one mission long, so really this game has 3 days of the week. I don't know if I should consider that mercifully short or woefully unfinished, and I don't care. Corkscrew wakes back up to find his woman personality and voice completely gone because he has Bin Laden's penis. But out of sheer revenge, we've got to go kill him. Oh, but he did somehow convince people to start mailing him organs for his trafficking ring, which means that the city's gone postal and the apocalypse has started. Whatever. Our only task is to head back to the medical center, shoot up a swarm of enemies, and then watch a cutscene of Corkscrew shooting Bin Laden in the head. That's it, that's all. And we're finally done with Corkscrew RuLes. Good God, where do I start? Almost nothing about this game ever comes close to what Postal 2 did in not only being a good sandbox game, but a genuinely enjoyable experience. The player's freedom in tackling errands and choosing how you want to do them is almost completely lobotomized. The map design is entirely backwards, it's alarmingly cryptic when it wants to be. The entire experience is undercooked, underwhelming, but somehow exhausting at the same time. But this game entirely understands the baddie mania of Postal 2 and leans super hard into it. Perhaps a little too hard for most players' taste. I think this was worse than Eternal Damnation, but it's still closer to a traditional Postal 2 experience. Bafflingly so. It's a total mess, but I appreciate that it exists. Kind of. Despite the Euro jank, the game was surprisingly stable, almost no doubt a result of the Steam port, but I was expecting this to be non-functional. People usually peg this as the, if not one of, the worst Postal experiences you can have, and I see where they're coming from, but I don't quite think this deserves the 0 out of 10 reputation it has. Does that mean it's good? No, not at all. This was ass, and easily the worst version or add-on of Postal 2 because it does not understand what made the original good and falls into a ton of really obvious and grating bits of game design that aren't made up for by being funny so you can't take it seriously, but I think it still has a ton of charm, both intentional and not intentional. It's like watching your teenage cousin make a terrible offensive mod all on his own. You're impressed with the drive to make something, but also not impressed with the final product. I mean, I guess they can do whatever they want. After all, they did make Sabotane. Despite how mediocre this was, it does have its fans. Almost entirely Russian, but fans nonetheless, and I assume there are some Japanese fans out there. The fact this was officially licensed is absurd. Running with Scissors gave the thumbs up, so they are well aware it exists, at least on paper. They don't seem especially fond of it, or devastated that you cannot legally purchase this game anymore. But back in 2005, things might have been a different story. Corkscrew RuLes was a symptom of Postal 2 being the juggernaut that it was in Russia, and Running with Scissors was doing what they've always done, following the money. They were already forming a strong Russian connection because of Akella's commitment to publishing their games and lining their pockets. We've had at least one confirmation that they've personally flown down to Moscow to meet with Akella, to which they were accosted by little Russian kids pointing at their shirts saying, "Postal! Postal!" The company went from nearly shutting down during the development of Postal 2 to making enough money to keep the lights on and eventually being able to develop smaller expansions. They were kind of in maintenance mode for a while, just keeping themselves active and slowly but steadily making enough money to hire more staff, but the prospects at continuing the franchise were actually outreaches from others. Firstly, imagine their shock when Akella reached out to them in 2006 with the lofty claim that they could develop the next mainline Postal game, Postal 3. I know it was mostly because of their publishing work, but in some small way, Corkscrew RuLes probably helped deepen the trust Running with Scissors had with Akella. which is hilarious looking back at it. I'm just imagining them presenting this game to Vince and Mike like, do you like it? But alongside that, in the same year, the company was contacted by the infamous German movie director Uwe Boll to create a licensed film adaptation based on their franchise. In the span of 3 years, they went from near bankruptcy to drafting a brand new entry in the series and also working on a film adaptation at the same time. It was ambitious, to say the least, being involved in 2 high-risk, high-reward markets. But if things worked out, Running with Scissors could get money beyond their wildest dreams and truly regret nothing. Surely both ventures would be fruitful, right? Right? But I'm getting ahead of myself. As it stands, for the end of 2005 and beginning of 2006, the future looked very bright for Running with Scissors. Whatever happened to Avalon-style entertainment, I think they got bought out and stopped making games. For what it's worth, Sabotage actually looked pretty damn cool for a 2004 game, even if it's clearly Eurojank. For now, let's bring this modding adventure to a close. What a journey, eh? We've covered everything from new items to new maps to total conversions, but what's in store for the future? Fan mods and contributions are essential to the longevity of this game, if that wasn't made abundantly clear enough by the company promoting them and occasionally hiring said modders to work on official products. But now, since there's a full remake of Postal 2 on the way, Steam Workshop support is directly built in. And combined with running on a much more user-friendly engine in the form of Unity, the sky's the limit. As impressive as some of these mods are, Postal 2 still runs on an abomination of Unreal Engine 1, so the most impressive pieces of fan-created content come out kind of in spite of it, not because of it. There are plenty of mods I downloaded that just didn't work for one reason or another. The Holy Hand Grenade, MCR's Black Parade, replacing the Marching Band, a Raptor NPC, all didn't work, probably because of the game's spaghetti code. Maybe there's something to be said about the ingenuity of building something within stricter limitations, but the prospect of Postal 2 Redux mods have me excited. I know full well some insane Russian modder is gonna port Serious Sam and Overwatch weapons 1-to-1. Will someone be bold enough to try and finally get that Eternal Damnation remake done in Redux? What about Corkscrew RuLes? Okay, maybe not that one. There's only so much I can theorize on for what the future holds, but what I can do for now is give a very brief top 5 favorite mods featured in this video list. Number 5 is the Pokeball item. It's incredibly simple, but spawning dogs and cows and the occasional elephant is way too funny not to include. Number 4 is Tatooine City. The map itself is buggy and there isn't really much to do past exploring for 10 minutes, but there's so much soul here, man. Number 3 is Eternal Damnation, as in all of it. I have my grievances with it, but it's still so impressive that a fully functioning, fun campaign was made from Postal 2's engine and assets that stands out as its own entity. Plus, what it did for the company should not be overlooked, because it comes up later again on the franchise's history. Number 2 is the Multi-Legged Dude mod. It's only one joke, but the more legs that keep getting added, the funnier it is, and I will not be taking criticism. Number 1 you all saw coming. The Steamed Ham mod. Yes, I do like that 10-minute gag more than everything else featured. What about it? I hope you enjoyed this little look into the various fan creations for Postal 2 and my greater Postal franchise overview. Our next stop is the Postal movie, and I hope you're excited for that, because I am. But until then, have a lovely rest of your day. Stay strange.